Hi there, and welcome to Oakland Side 510. I'm Tasneem Raja, Editor-in-Chief of the Oakland Side. We are Oakland's independent, non-profit newsroom. Later in this episode, I'm going to tell you about Oakland Airport and its potential ICE data sharing, Mills College Children's School finding a new home, Oakland Tech's $1.4 million auditorium upgrade, the West Oakland Costco proposal moves forward, Ken Houston's ethics complaint gets dismissed, and Oakland restaurant news. But first, the Oakland School District has to cut over $100 million from its budget next year. Oakland Side education reporter Ashley McBride is going to join us to tell you what's at stake and how this is going to play out. Before we get to all of that, here's a word from our very first ever podcast sponsor, the Oakland Museum of California. You know what makes the Oakland Museum of California special? It's the only place that tells California's multifaceted story through art, history, and natural science, all under one roof. Right in the heart of Oakland, OMCA celebrates the people, cultures, and landscapes that make this state unique. You'll always encounter something new in its 3 core galleries and in special exhibitions like Good Fire, Tending Native Lands, and Black Spaces, Reclaim and Remain. From their beautiful garden filled with California native plants to amazing events like Thursdays and Spotlight Sundays, OMCA is designed to spark community connection. Visit museumca.org to plan your trip. OMCA, where California comes alive. Thank you, OMCA, for that message and for supporting this show. All right, now let's dig into this week's big story. Oakland public schools are facing absolutely brutal budget cuts. To help me understand what's happening and why, I'm joined by Ashley McBride, our education reporter, who's been covering Oakland Unified closely for over 5 years. Ashley, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Ashley, not all listeners are going to know this, but you are actually the only reporter who covers K-12 education in Oakland. I know there have been plenty of school board meetings over the years where you are literally the only reporter in the room. So I cannot think of a better person to help our listeners understand what is going on with OUSD's budget and why Oaklanders should care, whether or not they have a kid in Oakland public schools.
I'm happy to try.
What's the latest with OUSD's budget for next year?
The school board just approved a pretty ambitious plan to cut $102 million from next year's budget. That's roughly 20% of the district's unrestricted general fund. It'll mean a lot of pain everywhere.
Wow, that sounds like a ton of money. Do you have actually even a general sense of what Oakland schools stand to lose next year?
Well, it's important to note about that word plan. The superintendent herself said that what she presented wasn't really a plan, but more of a scenario. It directs staff to cut in certain areas or departments to hit a target number, but it doesn't really get more specific than that. We'll see massive reductions at the central office. That's the district's headquarters, including cuts of up to 50% at departments like communications, human resources, legal, academics, and facilities. But exactly who and what will be eliminated, we don't really know yet. And school site budgets will also be cut by up to 10%, but it'll be up to school principals working with their staff and community in the spring to figure out what exactly that will look like.
Got it. Okay. Look, let's back up for listeners who have not been following all of this closely. Why does OUSD need to cut over $100 million?
So Oakland Unified has been spending more money than it brings in for years. Recently, the district has been relying on one-time funds, particularly those COVID relief packages, to cover expenses that outstrip revenue. And those funds have now run out. One driving force behind the budget gap is that enrollment has been declining. Mm-hmm. OUSD has lost about 3,000 students over the past decade, and fewer students means less money from the state since California funds schools based on total attendance. So as a result of all of this year, the district's cash reserves have been dwindling fast. When the board adopted its current budget back in June, they projected ending the year with about $27 million in the reserves. 45 days into the fiscal year, that projection dropped to $17 million. And by the end of October, it was down to just $1.3 million.
Oh boy. Okay. So they expected to end the year with nearly $30 million in the bank. And it's looking like they're actually going to end the year with closer to just $1 million in the bank. Is that right?
So it is, but it means that the district is not only making these changes for next year, they're also instituting an immediate hiring freeze and cutting this year's budget to shore up those reserves.
Oh, wow. Yeah. This is genuinely an emergency. So I want to back up even more. Help us understand the bigger picture here, numbers-wise. What is OUSD's total budget?
So Oakland Unified has a $1.1 billion budget, but a few $100 million of that is earmarked for things like capital funds and insurance. So when we talk about balancing the budget, we're talking about the general fund.
Okay.
And for this year, the district projected about $800 million in revenue and $916 million in expenses in that general fund. So all of the cuts have to come from there, and that fund covers all the core operations.
Okay, I'm going to be honest, Ashley. When I first heard that OUSD's expenses add up to just under $1 billion a year, I was really surprised. I mean, honestly, I was stunned. That is a far bigger number than I would have expected. And in fact, I have been going around asking friends and family, sort of like this super nerdy party game, to guess off the top of their heads what OUSD's annual budget is. Now, these are engaged, informed people, and on average, they're guessing more like $200 million a year. So help people like me, and I suspect a lot of our listeners, just get better educated here. Like, for starters, where does the general fund money go?
So like most school districts, the vast majority of it goes to salaries and benefits for staff.
Mm-hmm.
For this school year, the district budgeted $412 million for salaries. And when you add in benefits, it's about $652 million total in personnel costs. The rest of the budget covers books, supplies, repairs, contracts, insurance, everything else.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful. How does OUSD's $1 billion budget compare to other school districts around us?
So across the Bay, San Francisco Unified has around a $1.2 billion budget. And last year, SFUSD also cut more than $100 million from its budget. And similarly to OUSD, San Francisco also has the state watching them and their budget decisions very, very closely.
Right.
San Francisco has a larger student population, but they do have fewer low-income kids and fewer English language learners.
Got it. Okay. And I know that you and your editor, Esther Kaplan, are planning to compare OUSD's finances to more cities and school districts in the coming months.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about $100 million in cuts, am I right in thinking there's just no way that individual schools aren't going to feel the pain here, right?
Yeah, there's just no way around it. The district tried to protect schools by focusing on central office cuts, and they could only come up with about $21 million in savings that way. So now school sites will get hit too. The plan the board approved includes cutting school site budgets by 7.5 to 10% across the board. That's about $32 million. The central office will absorb $21 million in planned cuts, plus an additional 15 to 20% on top of that. And then there are some more controversial moves, like a 10% cut to special education, which amounts to around $12 million. At the school board meeting, parents immediately raised concerns that that special education spending cut could violate federal law, which requires districts to maintain the same level of spending on special education from year to year.
Okay, so 10% cut to a school site, like what does that actually mean? What gets cut?
We don't really know yet. The specifics aren't clear, and that's part of why some board members voted against the plan. But we can look at where schools typically spend their discretionary money. They spend it on literacy tutors, case managers, teacher coaches, after-school programs, sports, student clubs, field trips, arts programs. For example, Oakland High School has been using discretionary funds to pay for college and career readiness specialists, stipends for teachers running study halls, contracts with community organizations for after-school programming, and AP exam fees. So all of those things are now at risk.
Oh, wow. Okay, and how about at the central office?
There will be deep cuts across every department. The superintendent's office, communications, human resources, technology, custodial services, academics, all of those are shrinking. Here's one concrete example. The technology department currently maintains a 1-to-1 student-to-device ratio, meaning every kid has a Chromebook. That costs about $3.5 million a year. They're considering going back to a 4-to-1 ratio to save money.
Oh, wow.
Another example is custodial services. Right now, classrooms are cleaned daily. Under the proposal, they might only be cleaned every other day because they'd have fewer custodians covering more square footage.
We're not talking about abstract cuts here.
Right. And what's worrying is that the district has been investing in increasing enrollment, which has been working. Enrollment ticked up this year for the first time in 8 years.
Right.
But if families see cuts to the basic things that make schools function, like cleanliness, technology, support staff, they might leave, which creates a downward spiral.
So there's been talk again about school closures. Is that part of this plan?
Not immediately, but yes. The interim superintendent, Denise Sadler, is asking the board to commit to what she calls a full restructuring plan, which includes school closures or mergers to address the long-term structural problem. The board majority has been resistant to closures, but Sadler is basically saying OUSD can't get to a sustainable place without closing schools.
Do we know if closing schools actually does save money?
That's a really good question, and OUSD has not really presented compelling evidence. The last time OUSD closed and merged schools was 2022, and before that in 2019 and 2020. The only report we've ever gotten from the district was one in 2021 on that first round of mergers and closures. Some mergers resulted in modest savings, like just under $1 million in one case, but other mergers actually increased costs. And in almost every case, there was some enrollment loss as families left for other schools. At Sankofa United, which was created by merging 2 schools, enrollment dropped by half from the combined previous enrollment. Less than a quarter of the students from Kaiser, the school that closed, went to the new merged school.
So closures are disruptive. It can end up sending kids out of OUSD, and the financial benefit is uncertain.
Right. The argument for them is that in the long term, the district can be more efficient with its money by running fewer schools. But OUSD hasn't really brought that evidence. And critics point out that closures disproportionately affect Black, Latino, and low-income students and can harm kids' academic performance. With that being said, the district is out of options.
Right.
The Alameda County superintendent involved here, Elise Castro, has been really blunt with the board. She wrote them a harsh letter in November saying that they were deferring difficult decisions and approving, quote, what can best be described as a plan to have a plan.
Oh, okay. What happens now?
So the board approved the plan for $102 million in cuts last Wednesday. The vote was 5 in favor and 2 against, with directors Rachel Latta, Jennifer Brohard, Van Cedric Williams, Valerie Batchelor, and Clifford Thompson voting yes, and Mike Hutchinson and Patrice Berry voting no.
Got it.
The board members who voted against it felt it lacked details, like where exactly will these cuts happen, which positions, which programs. There was nothing in the document that directed the superintendent to come back in January with a specific implementation plan. Now that plan goes to the county superintendent for review and feedback, and she'll give a response in January.
You know, Ashley, I have to be honest here. After everything we've covered in this episode, especially as a parent of a kid who's going to be entering OUSD for the first time next year, this is overwhelming. I mean, look, you've done a great job laying it all out. It is so much to take in.
It is. And I think what struck me most from that board meeting last week was just how exhausted and disengaged everyone seemed, from board members to community members.
Tell us more about that.
That meeting was honestly not as packed as I'd expected. I've been in the room where there have been some really heated discussions, and this was not one of them. There were more people there to speak on other issues, like a contingent of Skyline High School students and parents spoke about the need for safety investments at their school after the shooting that happened last month.
Right.
A charter renewal for the Bay Area Technology School was on the agenda after the school saw some low test scores, so dozens of families showed up to ask the board to keep their school open. When it came to the budget discussion, public comment was relatively tame. Several people brought up good points, like that the massive proposed cuts to special education may not be legal, disinvestments in safety and cleanliness risk driving families away, which would further hurt the district's finances. But what struck me was that many people focused less on what was on the chopping block and more on board members' conduct. Most of the meetings this year have seen board members arguing with each other, interrupting and speaking over each other, and I think people are just fatigued by all the infighting. One mom said she was exhausted by the, quote, annual ritual of budget crisis. Another dad said he was upset that the board meetings had devolved into grandstanding and bickering instead of actual problem solving. One parent said, "If you guys would like to see more of a turnout here, I really suggest you all shake hands and learn how to work together."
Yeah. So there's this sense of crisis in the room, but also just frustration with how Oakland School Board decides the district's budget each year. Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, Ashley, what are you watching for next?
I'm watching to see if the county superintendent approves this plan or sends it back. Just this week, I emailed the County Office of Education to ask them to send me Superintendent Castro's letter to the board once it's available so that I can read it and report on it. Mm-hmm. I'm watching for the board and Superintendent Sadler to hash out more details about this budget plan. I'm watching the teachers union, who is in negotiations with OUSD, to see if things are going to escalate there. And beyond all this, there's a superintendent search that's supposed to get underway in January.
Right.
But mostly I'm listening to parents and students and teachers, because they're the ones who will feel these cuts every single day.
Ashley, thank you so much for explaining all of this.
Thank you for having me.
Find Ashley's reporting on these huge planned cuts to OUSD at oaklandside.org with really helpful data visualizations and easy to understand explainers. We'll also link to the reporting we talked about today in the show notes. If you want to support the only journalist who covers K-12 education in Oakland full-time, please become a member of the Oakland Side. Right now, about 4,000 people support this newsroom as members with, on average, just $10 a month. Thanks to them, all of this reporting is free to everyone, and the Oakland Side gets to count Ashley McBride as a member of this newsroom. I hope you will join them. All right, let's get into some more recent reporting from our newsroom. There's more in the full stories, which we will link to in the show notes, and you can always find at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter if you want to get this reporting in your inbox. Okay, heads up, folks. If you're flying through Oakland Airport this holiday season, this is something you should know. The Transportation Security Administration, or the TSA, might be sharing your passenger data with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That's ICE. The New York Times reports that TSA provides lists to ICE multiple times a week, showing air travelers who will be traveling through airports. ICE can then cross-reference those lists against their database of people who are subject to deportation and show up to arrest them. This data sharing practice started in March, and it has already led to several high-profile arrests, including a 19-year-old college student who was arrested at a Boston airport and deported to Honduras. We asked Oakland airport officials whether this is happening here. They told us they're in the dark. TSA does not share that information with them. And there's more. Oakland's airport just launched a new program called the Oak Guest Pass. So it allows non-flying visitors to pass through security and meet loved ones right at the gate. Sounds lovely, but here's the thing. To get a guest pass, you have to submit an online application with your date of birth, gender, full legal name, and a scan of your passport or state ID. The TSA reviews each application before granting approval. We don't know whether the TSA plans to hand over that guest pass data to ICE. The agency has not responded to our questions. Okay, here's some good news. The Mills College Children's School, a beloved local early education school that was slated to close next June, has found a lifeline. Aurora School, a private school in Rockridge serving kindergarten through 8th grade, announced last week that it will welcome students and educators from the Mills Children's School beginning next year. Around 20 students are expected to enroll. The children's school was established in 1926 as a lab school, providing hands-on, inquiry-based learning and early childhood education. But after Mills merged with Northeastern University, the decision came down in June to close the school. For families who valued the children's school's emphasis on outdoor play and experiential learning, this merger preserves that legacy, at least in part. Okay, next up, a proposal to bring a Costco to West Oakland's old Army base took an initial step forward this week when a city council committee voted unanimously to advance the plan. Councilmember Carol Fife, who represents West Oakland, brought forward the proposal. If approved by the full council next week, it would authorize the city administrator to negotiate an exclusive agreement with Costco and its developer, Deca Companies. Councilmember Fife emphasized the potential for good jobs. Costco pays an average of $26 an hour and much needed tax revenue for the city. She also noted that the store would bring new grocery options to a neighborhood that the federal government considers a food desert. But some West Oakland residents raised concerns about pollution from increased truck traffic and customer vehicles in an already heavily impacted area, along with some other concerns. Okay, speaking of the City Council, Oakland's Public Ethics Commission has dismissed Oakland City Council member Ken Houston's ethics complaint against Josh Rowan, a senior city administrator who leads the city's departments of transportation and public works. Houston had accused Rowan of slander and, quote, character assassination, but the commission found no evidence of a violation. But Rowan also filed an ethics complaint against Houston, and that is still under investigation. Rowan claims Houston engaged in, quote, a sustained pattern of interference, intimidation, and misconduct, end quote, around several multi-million-dollar public contracts. Rowan says Houston violated the city charter, which bars elected officials from directing city staff or interfering in administrative matters like city contracting. All right, here's some news from Oakland's food scene. Breadwinners is a new sandwich shop opened in Swan's Market in Old Oakland. They're serving build-your-own sandwiches, salads, smoothies, and house specials. Then we've got Pickle Athletics. Yes, that is a pickleball social club, which opened on Telegraph in Temescal with not just courts, but also a full kitchen and wine bar. Early morning pickleballers, you can grab pastries and breakfast sandwiches. For lunch, there's cold sesame noodles, kale salad, tuna and focaccia, and there's beer, wine, and yes, pickles on the menu. Look, it's not all good news in Oakland food. Red Bay Coffee closed its Fruitvale flagship cafe at the end of November because their lease came to an end. And Rose's Tap Room, a beloved Temescal spot for local beers and wine, closed its doors after nearly 10 years. Owners cited slow foot traffic and high rent as reasons for the closure. And finally, here is an inspiring story about what parent volunteers can accomplish when they commit to the long haul. So over the past 20 years, a group of Oakland Tech parents raised $1.4 million to completely upgrade the school's auditorium, bringing back a performing arts program that had been decimated after the state took over Oakland Unified in the early 2000s. Last week, the school held a ceremony to unveil the upgraded space. New seats, state-of-the-art sound and lighting, fresh paint, new carpet, and a modern projector. The parent group actually started way back in 2004 with a turkey dinner fundraiser to save an after-school drama program, and here's where they are now. If you want to see the space in action, Tech is inviting the community to a student production of Arsenic and Old Lace in January and February. All right, that is this week's episode of Oaklandside 510. You can find all the stories we talked about today at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter to get our reporting delivered straight to your inbox. Thank you, OMCA, for sponsoring today's episode. If your company, organization, pickleball league, book club, or family would like to sponsor an episode, get in touch, hello@oaklandside.org. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, rate it, share it with your friends and neighbors. This episode was produced by Kiana Mogadam, edited by Esther Kaplan, and hosted by me, Oaklandside Editor-in-Chief Tasneem Raja. This is our last episode of the year. We're taking 2 weeks off, and we will see you back on January 9th. On behalf of our entire newsroom, thank you for showing up for Oakland